Yeah. Yeah. You know, this is an experience that all of us have had. Doesn't matter about our cultural background. We've all had this experience. You've ever been to a party and you've walked in on a conversation and somebody's talking about something, it's clearly in English, they're using English words, but you've missed the context of what they're talking about. And you stand there and you go, yeah, okay, yeah. And you're thinking very almost panicking in your mind, what in the hell is this person talking about? I hope they don't ask me a question, otherwise I'm going to look stupid because I won't know how to answer it. But you stand there going, yes. It's human nature, communication. It's just what happens in communication with humans, between humans and humans. If we're not sure what is being talked about, even in the language that's our first language, we'll say yes to it. And many of the times when Yolngu are listening to English conversation, which for them is usually far too fast because English can be a fifth or even sixth language. Sometimes I'll say to old people, how many languages do you know? And they'll count up to 12. Some of those are languages, some of them are dialects, but they'll count up to 12. And then I'll say, and what about English? And I'll go, oh, and English. And English. Now, the history between Yolngu and English is not very long. It's less than 80 years. And there's been no really in-depth work done on it. And unfortunately, no government of any political persuasion has created an English learning program for Yolngu people in northeast Arnhem. And they haven't done it for any other Australian-speaking cultural group across Australia. So when people face that sort of communication, they usually say yes to it, as all human beings do too. Because they're not sure what they're saying yes to, they're not sure what they should be saying no to. So they think the easiest way to deal with the embarrassment is just go, yeah, yes, okay, yes. So you're right to do that, yes. I haven't got a clue what I'm right to do, but yes. Because if you say, no, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about, usually you're dealing with English-speaking people that have no training of how to speak to people who are English second language. And so they'll just give them another barrage of information. I'm reminded of one story after the intervention in 2007, and the government officials were put in every community. And this one community were telling me about it, how this lady who was, she was like, she had an English machine gun, they called her, English machine gun. They said when we saw her coming, we would hide. We would hide because she would just come at us like an English machine gun, ta-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And we couldn't even get the first thing she talked about, the second or the third, and then she'd start asking us for responses. She didn't slow down, she sped up. As though the faster she said the English, the more effect it would have upon the people. Well, it had an effect upon the people. No one would come to meetings and so on. I was talking to a government official just a few months ago, and he said, yeah, but hang on. The people from this department had gone and talked to Aboriginal people in this committee and that committee, and they all said yes. They all said, yeah, no worries. Okay, we'll go along with that. And I said, how many questions came from the group? And they said, no, nobody asked any questions. Everybody was happy with it. Well, I would suggest if nobody asked any questions, the communication had failed. So that same group of people went and talked to somebody about the, let's say the Amateur Fishing Association or the Pastoralist Organisation or anything else. They would at least get 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 clarification questions. Now, if you don't get questions from a group of Aboriginal people when you're speaking to them, the chances are they have not understood anything you've been talking about. One other example. We're doing podcasts at the moment, and I'm using Yolngu people as researchers. And one day that my colleague, Yolngu colleague, gets on the phone and he says, and I said to them, what subject should we be working on this week so I can get ready and do the research around it and get ready to produce podcasts? And he says, can you explain to us what bridging the gap means? And I said, what? Bridging the gap? What, that doesn't mean anything to you? He says, it means nothing to us Yolngu. I said, hang on, this is 10 years. You've had 10 years of meetings with government officials coming to your communities, 10 years of it. And what, you were the chairman of most of those meetings. He said, yeah, I chaired most of those meetings. So you walked out of those meetings completely confused about what they'd been talking about for the last 3 or 4 hours. And he said, totally confused. We still don't know what closing the gap means. Wow, I sat there shaking my head and thinking, no wonder government failures programs fail, and fail flat out in Aboriginal communities, because there's no real concentration on good communication. And it's just this yes game all the time. This same colleague of mine, well, we worked through about 12 programs to break the back on what does closing the gap mean. And one of the biggest problems with closing the gap, there's a linguistic problem, but there was also a worldview problem, is that it's a gap in statistics. A gap in statistics. And of course, a gap in statistics is not going to work for Aboriginal people. They're not into statistics and graphs and all those sorts of things. So gaps in graphs and statistics ain't going to work. But it was interesting, this same person, this same colleague of mine, Yolngu colleague, he said later on, he said, you know, some of the first words we learnt when we came to the missions, and Yolngu people came to the missions like as refugees because their trade had been closed down in 1916 by the South Australian government, their trade with the Macassans. So people went into economic crisis right along this coast in North Australia here. And they went to the missions to survive. Because it was just so hard, they couldn't get things like fish hooks, which they were used to getting for hundreds of years, that came down from China and so on. So they had to go back to making their own fish hooks even, out of bits of wood. Difficult, if you haven't got a good skill in that area. So they came to the missions to survive, and they said the first words we learnt in English were yes and no. But we learnt it was more important to say yes than to say no. Because if we say no, we found ourselves out on the outer edge of the mission authority. We learnt that if we said yes, become yes men in a sense, everything went okay. And he said to me, we've got to stop saying yes, whether it's to the Lands Council, whether it's to our own Aboriginal organisations, or to the government, and people that come along and we just go, yo, yo, yes, yes. We've got to start saying, no, we do not understand what you're talking about. Please find somebody who can communicate with us. If you can't do it yourself, find somebody who can communicate with us. So that's why yes is said, because it's the easiest way out. In the end, it stops you having a lot of headaches. You can go home in peace and not be tormented with more words being machine gunned at you.